Alright, I think it's finally time. I think it's time to talk about using the Lomi full-time for composting. No other method of composting. How did it go? How does it work? Does it actually produce compost? What do I do with it since I'm living in an RV? Let's get into it. Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here or you just didn't know, I'm living in an RV full-time for the time being. I have no idea how long it's going to be. Oh my gosh, I forgot we have to get flax seeds at the store. So this winter we're going to be spending in Ohio with our families, and after that we'll probably be back in the RV. So while we're in the RV, whenever that may be, during which times of the year, we will be using the Lomi to compost because that's the only way we can. It's easily the smallest option, the lowest maintenance for me as an individual. It's the quickest as well. So there are so many reasons why, as me living in an RV, this is the greatest way to compost. If you're wondering which way you think you should compost, you can check out this video up here where I break down 12 different ways you can compost depending on your budget, your space, are you a renter, how much time do you have, and all that sort of stuff. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down what it's actually like using the Lomi full time to compost, because I know a lot of other creators have a Lomi, but they use it in conjunction with like a regular backyard compost. I used to do that in Las Vegas as well. So this is using solely the Lomi for 6 months. How does it work? Is it actually worth it to invest in if you're going to be using it full time? And so forth. Right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I do not recommend the Lomi if you don't need to use the Lomi. And what I mean is, if you have a small backyard and you can use something like one of these spinning bins, use that. If you can make a DIY bin like I did in my very first composting setting in an apartment, do one of those. There are other indoor options too, bokashi composting, vermicomposting, and so forth. Why do I say this? Because the Lomi is easily the most expensive and probably the most wasteful to create. I say probably, it is the most wasteful to create. It's a machine. It uses energy as well, so like it's not the most eco-friendly option. But at the end of the day, reducing our food waste in any way is going to be better than sending it to the landfill. The Lomi is better than sending food to the landfill, but I do think all of these other options for composting are better than the Lomi. Let's go ahead and just lay that out up front. If you want to learn more about food waste and why sending food waste to the landfill is so bad, you can check out this video up here. But in short, food waste in the landfills creates methane, and methane is a greenhouse gas, causing climate change. As well as it's just a waste of nutrients and resources. When you're composting, you're creating free fertilizer. And then composting breaks down the food and there's no methane created when you're composting. So that's why I still say that the Lomi is better than the landfill, because the Lomi is reducing all of this food waste from the landfill. It's reducing methane emissions, and so forth. Now that I basically just said nobody should be using the Lomi, I still think the Lomi is worth it 95% of the time. And we'll get into that in a second. So if it's in your budget, if you can afford it, the Lomi is worth it. It does get the job done. I love how quick it is. I love how easy it is. There's no effort on my part other than putting the food into the bucket and hitting a button. Very simple. So it's great for people who don't have a lot of time to compost. People who don't have a lot of space to compost. Obviously I'm able to do it in an RV. But again, the biggest con is the price. I believe it's around $500. And the charcoal, I didn't know this either. The charcoal filters that you're supposed to replace frequently that I have not replaced. I've replaced once since I've gotten the Lomi. I should probably order some filters. They're $50 each. Like, it's a very expensive investment to reduce waste from the landfill, which is another reason why I don't recommend this option, especially if you're on a budget. There are so many cheaper ways to compost than the Lomi. If it's in your budget, if this is what you want, it is worth it. It will be worth your time and investment because it's easy, it's efficient, it doesn't take up much space, it doesn't use that much energy, and it will reduce your food waste. But something to note here too is that Lomi doesn't produce true compost. It's basically a dehydrator. Because it produces compost so quickly, it does have to work at higher temperatures than like a normal compost. But while it does retain some of the nutrients in that food waste, it's not going to retain as much nutrients as a true compost setting. You can still use the Lomi waste in your garden. You can add it to a regular compost pile if you have both, but it's not going to produce soil that you can typically add to your houseplants. It does like continue to break down in your houseplants and it can get kind of gross. If you want to learn more about the Lomi, how it's built, how much energy it uses, why it doesn't produce true compost, you can check out my full Lomi review up here. Let's get into some of the difficulties I've had over the last 6 months. First, we're going to go back to February of this year, 2023. I'm going to talk about how the Lomi clogged. I don't think I actually talked about the clogging itself, but our Lomi clogged twice this spring, in February and in March. I believe it was because I added too much bread, which is weird because the Lomi on their website, they're like, you can compost anything in here besides like big seeds like avocado pits and mango pits. There's never any mention of like, you can't compost a lot of bread in here. And that's the only thing that I can correlate because both times I added like a lot of moldy bagels and both times it clogged. So I think you can use bread in your Lomi, you just can't add a lot at a time because the bread plus the moisture and then the heat, it essentially turns it into a mushy dough and then bakes it and it just gets rock solid. Anyway, back to me in February. It has been soaking for 3 days. Maybe even 4. Okay, I didn't take a photo or a video of it because I'm bad at vlogging, but I think I found out one of the reasons why the Lomi kept getting clogged, because it happened again. The first time, I think it was because I added too much liquid, but also I remembered I had bread in there. And this time we had more moldy bread, so I put it in there because Lomi says themselves, bread and meat and other stuff that you normally can't put in a regular compost can compost in your Lomi. And it got jammed again. This time, thankfully, it was not rock hard. It was kind of like a Play-Doh-y consistency, so I was able to pull it out with like my hands and a knife. But so far, I'm pretty confident you should not be putting bread in a Lomi. I think I'll keep trying it just to test my hypothesis, but for now, that's what I think. Okay, sorry it's so dark, but I'm walking to Nahi and I wanted to record this before I forgot. This was about a week or two into using the Lomi full time. And today, granted, it was probably my fault. I think I made it a little too wet because it like turned into mush, and then because the Lomi heats it up, it solidified into like this giant food brick in the bottom of the Lomi. And because I'm bad at vlogging, I forgot to take a photo or video of it. Anyway, that's my adventures with the Lomi so far. They've kind of all been negative. Alright, now we're bringing it to March. March was when we actually started using it full time, because in February we were still in our house in Las Vegas. We still had a regular compost bin, so I was using it off and on. Like I mentioned in those first few videos I recorded, the biggest issue we faced at first was how much we could actually fit in a Lomi. We will see if all of our compost fits. Okay, already downside number 1, it does not hold all of the compost in this bucket. The good news though, we're not going to be able to keep this bucket in the RV because the RV fridge is super small. So it should be able to keep the amount of compost that we'll be keeping in the freezer in the RV. But it turns out, actually, I'll just get the compost. These compostable bags from Hold On fit the perfect amount that goes inside a Lomi bucket. Like a gallon of frozen food waste fits perfectly in the bucket. And I also let it sit in the sink and defrost a little bit so that more and more fits in there. These bags are compostable, so once they get absolutely disgusting, I'll add it to the Lomi. But we've used this bag. I think we've changed out this bag one time since moving into the RV in March. These bags last forever. We dump it in there, we put the bag back in the freezer. This cuts down on a lot of smell. Obviously, I don't want like rotten bananas sitting on the counter, especially in a small space like this. So storing your food waste in the freezer in a small space when you have a small compost setup is ideal. Anyway, so in March, we actually got rid of our regular compost bin, so it was go time to use the Lomi full time, even before we actually moved out of our house fully. And March came with 2 more struggles. Again, it clogged again. I had it sitting in our sink, hot water, obviously it cooled down, with water in there for hours on end. This was when we were actually like going to our house to clean it out and get it ready for the next tenants. So I would leave it sit there to soak for like nearly 24 hours, and we would come back and it would still be hard as a rock. So after days and days of soaking and pounding away with knives and screwdrivers, Dan finally had to take apart the entire bucket to get this solid brick of bread, solid food waste out of the Lomi bucket, because the blade wasn't spinning. So we couldn't use the Lomi because it wouldn't actually get spun around and break down. Thankfully, it was an easy fix, but again, still frustrating. Partially user error, sure, but I think they probably could also educate people better on what you can and can't put in your Lomi. Again, this is just me speculating that it's bread. I don't actually know, so maybe they've come out with something since, but I haven't heard anything. We had another issue in March. The Lomi just quit working. We had no idea. I was on their website, on like their Q&A page, the FAQ page. I was like on Reddit, I was on YouTube trying to find people with similar problems that we were having, and most people said it was a wiring issue, and I'm like, are you kidding me? A wiring issue? I don't have time to send the Lomi back. We're moving into the RV in like 3 days and I need to compost because obviously I don't want to send food waste to the landfill, but I also don't want food waste sitting in here in a trash can making the RV smell like food waste. Ugh. Some other people said like, oh, maybe it's a filter issue, so I changed out the filter. I got like an air gun and like blew everything out to make sure that there was no like little charcoal bits stuck in any of the airways and the vents. None of that worked, so it was a wiring issue. And we don't have any idea how we fixed it. Not a clue. Dan basically took it apart and like, I'll ask him what he actually did. I don't think he even knows what he did. I think he just kind of messed around with stuff. And then eventually we hit start and it worked again. And we haven't had a problem since. So knock on all the fake wood in here. That was our last malfunction in March. So we've gotten very, very lucky. Once we actually moved into the RV, we've had no problem. Lomi, please, I love you. don't give us any more problems. At this point, I need to change the filter. I know I do, because we have been using it probably at least once a week since moving into the RV. And again, I don't know how often you're supposed to change the filters, but I probably should change. The filters are completely compostable as well, which is really cool. They are just little charcoal like pebbles, I guess. But I have had some people comment on some of my videos saying that if you put the entirety of the charcoal filter into your Lomi, it will also clog. Even though, again, on their website, they say you can compost your entire charcoal filter at a time. So if you do have a Lomi and you are composting your charcoal filter, just be wary about using the entire filter all at once. Maybe do like 3 different cycles, adding a little bit at a time, so that it doesn't clog as well. So those are the troubles that we've had over the last 6 months. Some good things about the Lomi is that we are able to compost our bioplastics safely, which is really cool, and compost in general. Not only because we're in an RV, but because when you're in an RV park, you don't have curbside trash, recycling, or compost. Like, we don't even have curbside anything. So this truly is our only way to compost. Now some people are like, oh, you can get a worm bin. Worm bins are kind of big. As well as worms, you can't compost high acidic foods like onions and citrus. I eat a lot of onions. So I'm trying to prevent as much food waste as possible, and the Lomi definitely does that for me in my situation. Yeah, so we've composted some of those hold-on bags. We've composted some bioplastic like produce bags from natural grocers. We've composted our old Pila cases when they fell apart. So I really do like that about Lomi too, is that you can successfully and safely decompose bioplastics. Now, what do I do with my compost? We throw it away. And I believe I talk about that more in the Why Food Waste is So Bad for the Environment video, about how you actually can throw away compost and it won't be as harmful as throwing away full food waste. Because it's already broken down, there's no way for there to be methane. Well, maybe like trace amounts of methane, but it's going to be significantly less. Completely different ends of the spectrum on like throwing an apple into the landfill versus throwing a decomposed apple into the landfill, on how much methane that will create. So I don't have a problem throwing it away, also because that's my only option. I don't have a regular compost. I don't have a yard. We're in an RV. Could I find someone who wants to take it? Possibly, but again, I'm in an RV. I don't have room to store a bunch of dehydrated pseudo compost and wait for someone to come take it, or wait for me to be able to go drop it off somewhere. I throw it away. But again, I can do this because it's not creating methane by throwing it away. It's already broken down. And I use things like upcycled tortilla bags. We've got some tortillas and bagels up here. I will reuse those bags to throw the Lomi dirt away. And then I'll keep that bag of dirt under the RV, put a couple bucket loads in there, and then throw the entire bag away. So I'm not like buying new bags to throw it away and things like that. Now, when we used the Lomi in our house, we had our bedroom, a hallway, and then the kitchen. So we were very far apart from where the Lomi was when we were sleeping. And I like to run it at night. That's just my preference. That's when I personally remember, because when our compost is full, I'll put it in the sink so that it can defrost during the day, and then it's ready to go at night. That's just what works best and how I typically remember the order of events, the order of things I need to do. So we typically run it at night. So it's kind of on me. But all that to say, in our home, the light didn't bother me, the noise didn't bother me, the smell didn't bother me because we were so far away from it. But now our Lomi sits right here. Our bed is right there. What is that? 6 feet away? So at night when we run it, it's not terribly noisy, and like our AC typically drowns it out. Our AC is pretty loud in here. So the noise doesn't bother me, but the light, that little light is surprisingly very bright at 3 a.m. I do have an eye mask, like a sleep mask that I wear. So it doesn't bother me terribly unless Mochi wakes me up at 3 a.m. to scream at me, and then I notice the light. And it's hard to fall back asleep after that, as well as the smell. I mentioned this back in February. This was my biggest worry going into using the Lomi full time. I think the biggest thing I'm gonna hate about the Lomi is the smell. It doesn't smell bad, but it does smell like cooking vegetables, which isn't terrible unless you have a bad combination. For example, today we have orange peels, avocado, chipotle pepper, applesauce. And the smell doesn't bother me nearly as much as I thought it would. I've been very impressed with that because I am very sensitive to smell and I have migraines. So like smells can trigger migraines for me, and I was very worried about that. And again, it doesn't smell bad. It just smells like vegetables, but it's very potent and I'm not a huge fan of it. So again, when I start the cycle right when we go to bed, I typically fall asleep before it gets too smelly, which is great. And then I wake up to the smell in the morning. But by that time, we can open the windows, we're taking Denahi on a walk, and we leave for work. So like there's very little room for it to actually bother me. But just keep that stuff in mind if you are in a small space as well. It does make noise, there is a light that is on for the entirety of the cycle, and it does create some smells. Overall, I'm just really, really glad that we still have a way to compost in the RV that is low mess, that is low effort, and still helps us prevent food from going to the landfill. That's what's most important to me. Now, full disclosure, I was gifted this Lomi. Would I have bought it myself? Probably. because I do think this is the best option when you are in an RV, especially because I'm not sure how much this will actually affect your electricity bill. I'm going to run an experiment this winter by using the Lomi at my mom's house and seeing if it actually ups her electricity bill, and I will pay her back for the cost. Don't worry. But especially being in an RV park, you pay a flat rate for your water and electricity. So you can theoretically use as much water and electricity as you want. You're not going to pay more you're not going to pay more for using more or conserving. It's going to be the same rate. It doesn't cost me any more to run my Lomi being in an RV, which is great. It looks nice, and it's just a small little appliance right here on our shelf. It's not like a big worm bin or bokashi that like leaks fermented compost liquid. I think it's the least gross option for a small space at least, and for me personally. So overall, I highly recommend the Lomi for people in an RV. Other small spaces, probably, just because again, it is like the easiest, the less stinky, the least gross. But there are other options for composting in small spaces. Again, check out my full composting video on all the different ways you can compost. Hold on, Mochi's distressed. You okie dokie? Oh, you don't sound okie dokie. Cat hair all over me. Okay, where was I? But again, no matter how much I love the Lomi, no matter how much it has worked for me, despite the few technical difficulties, it is something to keep in mind. It is a machine. There will be technical difficulties. I still cannot recommend the Lomi to people when you have other composting options. When I was in a house in Las Vegas with a small yard, I didn't want to use the Lomi, even though I had it. When I was in an apartment in Japan with a small yard, there was no need to use the Lomi. Unless you're in a situation like me, the Lomi just isn't practical when it comes to costs, energy usage, and so forth, unless you have the money for it and you like the ease of it. I don't recommend it. But of course, I will never recommend you sending food waste to the landfill. So if you think that this is your only way to compost, I say you try it out. 3 small issues that were easily fixable over the last 6, 7, 8 months. So I consider that pretty good success rate. At the end of the day, food waste in the landfill is one of the worst things that we do as a society and as individuals. So any way that we can work to prevent that is going to be the best option. Whether that be the Lomi or one of the other options that I listed in that other video, pick what works best for you. These are just my thoughts and opinions as someone who has used the Lomi full-time exclusively. Because again, I don't think a lot of people use it exclusively. It's kind of like an addition, a supplement to their regular compost routine. And I wanted to make this video actually talking about what it's like using on a daily or weekly basis, and not just like running a cycle here or there. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you found value in it if you're interested in the Lomi. They run discounts frequently. In fact, my code will get you $50 off no matter when you use it, and I will leave it linked down below. But also, like, follow them on Instagram. They do Black Friday deals, they do Plastic Free July, Earth Day, Christmas, I don't know. I think they had a Father's Day deal even this year, so like, they run deals probably every month. Follow them if you want to get a Lomi at a discount. If you think you will actually use it, take my review with a grain of salt. And if you have any more Lomi questions, definitely let me know down below, because I would love to make a follow-up to this video and get all the Lomi information out there. But I did make a very in-depth video this spring on the Lomi as a whole. Again, you can check it out up here. That is all that I have for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Next week, we're talking about me being in the military and how can I call myself an environmentalist if I was in the military for 6 years. That's going to be a fun one. We'll see you then. But until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye, guys. Is this too much? It's a little fuzzy. That should be fine.